Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced the battery swapping policy and special mobility zones with zero fossil fuels in her budget speech. According to the government, this will encourage private players to develop sustainable and innovative business models for battery swapping or battery as a service. So what is battery swapping and how does it work? Battery swapping or battery as a service allows EV owners to replace discharged batteries with charged ones at the swap stations. This will address the problem of setting up charging stations and also reduce range anxiety among drivers. Further, battery leasing can help EV owners save the cost of purchasing a battery. The service is less time consuming and takes only a few minutes compared to charging at a battery station, which could take hours. It also requires minimum infrastructure. So those are some arguments in support of battery swapping. But will battery swapping really help India's EV adoption? And how will the government standardize batteries and connectors across OEMs? The other key questions: what are the immediate steps that the government can take to improve retail financing for the EV sector? And how is the big rise in the number of startups, new entrants in the EV space going to impact the electric vehicle market? Let's take all these questions to our guests. We're joined by Chetan Maini, co-founder and chairman of Sun Mobility; Rajiv Singh, partner and automotive leader at Deloitte India; Shamsher Dewan, the group head and vice president at ICRA; and Amit Gupta, CEO at Yulu Bikes. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. Amit, if I can begin this discussion with you, do you think battery swapping is really the solution to India's charging issues right now?
Yeah, certainly. If we talk about the commercial use case for two-wheeler, that is the best way to run a fleet. And I believe that electrification of mobility in India, especially in the city, will be driven through two-wheelers only. With rise in food delivery, grocery delivery, and every service we are talking about, pressing a button on the mobile phone, two-wheeler is the best format to happen. And if you look at markets outside of India, especially China, 100% of delivery within the city setting happens using electric vehicles. And this is a time for India to make assertive changes to the policy and promote the delivery on two-wheeler, and it's happening on electric mobility, and it's actually going to be good for everyone.
Right. So you're saying that this is a good step towards greater EV adoption. Chetan Maini, if I can come to you, Sun Mobility is already into the business of battery swapping in India. Many large OEMs are also running pilot projects. But does a policy in this space come with its challenges? How do you standardize batteries for all OEMs? Now, this is a competitive advantage that a company would like to keep to itself. Do you feel there will be challenges with regard to implementation?
So I see there's two areas. One is what you've talked about, the word of how do you make things more interoperable. And the second is around overall challenges within the industry to enable electric vehicles and battery swapping to be more successful. And in terms of battery swapping today, I think there are 3-4 key areas that are very important, right? So today, if you walked into a showroom and bought a vehicle with fixed batteries and the same vehicle with a swappable batteries, you currently cannot get the subsidy for one with swappable batteries. So that's a very important part to first address, that the policies are technology agnostic, and so we think that this would really help us. The second challenge is, when you buy the battery separate from the vehicle, you end up paying an 18% GST versus 5% for vehicles, right? That makes a huge burden on taxation on this area. Coupled with that, if you were to get battery swapping services or charging services today, it's taxed at 18% instead of 5%. So now you have a customer who's gone green paying 18% tax. So these two anomalies, I would say, around the GST and the swap and the policy on FAME are very important to kind of solve on this area, and that I think would give a good baseline. To your point around interoperability, our experience today, at least our solution is used by over 10 OEMs and in 20 products. To me, that's one level of showing interoperability. You can use 1, 2, or 3 batteries, and it's OEM agnostic, and it is product type agnostic. I think that's a very important part. And as we think of interoperability, it's important that we also think of innovation. To think of what your battery is today, it's going to be very different a year from today, maybe 20-30% better. We want to pass on that benefit to the consumer. So as we think of standardization, we have to also make sure that we are not crippling innovation. And maybe there are learnings from other industries. If we think of the telecom industry and the SIM card, You used to have the nano SIM and the micro SIM and different SIMs, and they still fit in the same phone, the plastic adapter, and you have various operators. So, phones in some ways would be vehicles. The SIM cards could be the different types of SIM cards, could be the different types of battery platforms, and the operators could be the different operators. So you're allowing consumers to have options, allowing innovation, and you're allowing operators. So there are mechanisms, I think, that can work. We're not one size fits all. And I think this is important as we think of the policy going forward.
Right. Important points there. Let me take this to Rajiv Singh of Deloitte and Shamsher Dewan of ICRA. Rajiv, if I can begin with you. Battery swapping was tried by Tesla as well. In fact, recently we saw the Tesla China vice president saying that we had tried battery swapping in 2013 and we realized that it works in certain use cases such as taxis or buses. These are segments where it can work better. Do you also believe that there are certain segments where battery swapping will work and maybe not in others?
So absolutely, I think it's a valid point, and what we heard even from the previous speakers, I think just building on that same point, I think that the market needs to be seen from two different angles or two different perspectives. One is the fleet market, and the second is the retail customers that we have. I think that battery swapping works very well, especially in the fleet segment. And there are reasons for it, because the fleet segment is extremely conscious in terms of the uptime of the vehicle. Say, for example, a taxi operator or a three-wheeler operator, or even a light commercial vehicle operator, for example, would want to ensure that the vehicle is driven, say, 22 out of 24 hours in a day or 23 out of 24 hours in a day. And if you go and tell him that, see, you will have to charge the battery for 6 hours, 8 hours in a day, his entire costing does not work out, right? So the fleet operators will be more than happy to see if they get to a solution of battery swapping, where they can give away a discharged battery and get a charged battery in a matter of just maybe 10-15 minutes, and they're back on the road, just like today they do with the diesel or petrol that they do. But a retail customer, for example, a retail customer would be more conscious about the driving experience, about the torque, about the kind of quick acceleration that he can get. And that's where I think the retail customer would look at designs where probably battery is going to differentiate the entire driving experience. And that's the reason I think that in the retail customer segment, we'll see the OEMs doing designing of battery and the entire battery management system, which is very specific to a particular segment in that sense. That's the reason why I think that even in Tesla, the experience was that, okay, with retail customers, it doesn't seem to work that better. Even whatever data we have so far from China, for example, indicates that battery swapping is more preferred by the fleet operators rather than the retail customers.
Right. So that is an important point. Shamsher, do you also believe that this will probably work for bus operators, for taxi operators, for fleet operators, maybe not for two-wheelers? Because what we've heard is that the government is considering bringing a battery swapping policy for two-wheelers in the first place, followed by three-wheelers, and then buses, and not maybe for electric four-wheelers. What would be your view?
No, I would agree with the fellow speakers here. I think battery swapping is possibly going to become a business model for segments which are for commercial applications, especially fleet operators. Now, whether we talk about the two-wheeler segment or the three-wheeler segment, these are the two segments where electrification is now panning out at a fast pace, right? And we are already seeing within the two-wheeler segment two different business models really emerging. One is the personal mobility segment, the products which are catering to personal mobility segment, and there are products which are now catering only to the commercial applications which are for last mile transportation, the e-commerce, the retail delivery segment. So in those segments, we believe that battery swapping is certainly the most viable solution. A, because it will bring down the initial cost of ownership, and secondly, it will reduce the time spent on charging the asset itself. But as Mr. Maini mentioned clearly, I think there are certain other gaps which need to be addressed along with the battery swapping policy, which we expect is going to come by the end of this month. So while we are all very favorable about battery swapping policy to come through, but I think it will also be very important to look at the finer details of the policy and how it really works out actually.
Right. What would be those gaps, if I may ask Rajiv. Raj, what gaps do you feel there are in our system which are holding up our EV adoption? Last year, the EV adoption was 1.8% of total vehicle registrations in India. Currently, for January and February, the total vehicle registrations, total EV registrations are up at about 61,000 for 2 months, 3.3%. How do you see the EV sector growing, and what are the hurdles which you feel are slowing down the growth in the sector?
So I see that the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers probably are at the cusp in a sense, I would say, from a EV adoption perspective. Because the TCO makes a lot of sense, especially in the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, to move from a ICE technology to a EV technology. Also, I think that from a perspective of the various, fame and through various incentives which are available with the state governments and so on, I think there is a lot in terms of incentive which is already available to the consumers. It's a question of now consumers getting comfortable with the EV as a technology. One of the biggest hurdles that we see in EV technology is lack of charging infrastructure. Now, this is something that even in the research that we did as recent as just about 2 months back, it came as the number one hurdle in terms of adoption of EV technology, especially in two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And I think that is what swapping to a certain extent can address. I would not say that it would address everything. It would extend to a certain extent, especially for the last mile connectivity, micro-mobility services. It does address some of those requirements. But one of the other things that I just want to lean in and leave into this conversation is we should also keep in mind that, for example, Mr. Mani quoted the example of a handset and a chip and various service providers. What we need to keep in mind is battery is almost constituting to 30 to 40% of the cost in case of a vehicle. And if you think of a vehicle now without the battery, it's more like just a hardware. So definitely there will be shifting profit pools, especially in this particular sector. And that is what I think should also be kept in mind, that there will be some resistances which will come from a perspective of how the profit pools across the entire value chain is going to shift. The third thing I think we should keep in mind is also when we talk of interoperability, there will be issues with respect to who provides for the warranty cover, who provides, for example, in case there are any kind of hazards, whether it is a short circuit, whether it is a fire. Is it the battery service provider? Is it the battery manufacturer? Or is it the vehicle manufacturer? So there are a few things, and most importantly, I think getting all the OEMs and everyone to agree on a common standard, I think is going to be also equally important.
Yes, it will be a challenging one, definitely. We believe that the industry is divided over this. Let's see how this goes. We're going to take a short break, but this is an interesting conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue when we are back. Welcome back. You're watching our Budget 2022 special, and this is our focus on the electric vehicle sector and budget announcements on the EV sector. Let me go across to our guest once again. And Chetan Mani, if I can come to you, you were somebody who brought the Riva, India's first electric car, way back in 1998. This is a time, over the last 1 year or so, we've really seen an implosion of electric vehicle entrants in India. Startups, there are companies manufacturing other material who have no experience in EVs but are getting into this space. What is this implosion and the large number of startups and new entrants in this space going to do to the EV sector? How do you see the market developing?
Well, actually, it's very exciting. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's the first time everything is coming together, right? Oil prices are high, technology is at the right place, government support is coming in, investments are coming in. It's just the right ecosystem. And I think that having seen what's happened globally with some startups and how well they've done, the entry barriers are much less to go electric today. The world's much flatter. So we're going to see a lot more companies from new OEMs coming up. We're going to see a lot of companies on technology, on solutions, on infrastructure. And I think this is going to be a big play because it's also a big technology play. And you also have a new consumer and their expectations. We've also seen companies in new energy areas being able to build brands overnight. And so therefore, I think if they actually deliver to the value of the customers, you could see a fair bit of transformation in this space. We're also trying to see a bit of democratization of how manufacturing would potentially happen. You think of 15 years ago and how cell phones were and how vertically integrated they are. You look at it today, people get A, B, C, and a screen from somewhere, battery from another place, put it together, but they add the pieces that integrate it well. This reduces time to market and also reduces cost of manufacturing. And so in such businesses, battery swapping and others become very easy because a lot of startups could use such solutions and go to market quicker. So I believe that there is a big transformation happening in the country that's going to come across, and that's really good because that's what we need. If we're going to be, a $300 billion business by 2030, this has to be something we not only lead in India, but we take these solutions globally like we've done in the two-wheeler space and the small car space.
All right, so you believe that there's a big transformation going on in the automotive sector right now. Shamsher Dewan, if I can put this question to you, there are also a large number of new entrants in India or global EV players which have come into India, which are low-powered electric vehicles or low-speed electric vehicles. There have also been concerns about the handling of electric vehicles, safety as well. Recently, there was an incident of an EV battery catching fire, though the circumstances in which this happened in Gurgaon are still being investigated. So do you think those are some of the concerns, some of the issues around handling, around safety that companies will have to keep in mind, governments will also have to think about as they see this explosion in new entrants?
Yeah, sure. I think that is one area of concern apart from range anxiety and charging infrastructure about the safety norms which are going to be implemented and followed by all the OEMs. So whenever there's a fire issue with an electric vehicle, it is largely pertaining to the battery, and that is primarily because the electrolyte which is used in lithium-ion batteries is a liquid one compared to a solid one in solid-state batteries. But unfortunately, solid-state batteries are still, a long way to go. They're still currently being looked at from a pilot stage project in various markets. We feel that, the commercial scalability of those is still some time away. So to that extent, I think what most of the battery manufacturers and the EV OEMs are doing is looking at how they can optimize the design for the existing solution, whether it is the NMC technology or the LFP technology for batteries to address the safety concerns. While there have been certain unfortunate incidents, not just in India but globally as well. I mean, we've seen, Hyundai having a large recall. Likewise, other, OEMs like General Motors also had a large recall for one of their products. So that will also play out on the minds of people. But I think at the same time, at the back end, the entire ecosystem is working towards addressing those concerns.
Right. My final questions now to Amit. Amit, thank you for waiting patiently. I'd also like to ask you about your views on how you see the electric vehicle ecosystem growing in India. You're into electric bikes right now. What about putting electric scooters in your field? You already have a tie-up investment from Bajaj Auto. How are you going to be leveraging that? Are we going to see electric scooters from Bajaj Auto in Yulu Bike's fleet in the coming years?
Yeah, just to answer the last question first, hopefully 2022, we will see bikes from Bajaj on the road running on Yulu platform for sure. From our evolution standpoint, we actually believe that because India market was very infancy state when it comes to electric mobility, we were actually one of the early believer and also doer. So unlike many of the companies who were worrying about where's charging infrastructure, where's a battery, we ended up building our own vertically integrated stack. So we solve for not only the vehicle, but also design our own battery pack, charging infrastructure. And now Yulu vehicles are being charged using a swappable battery infrastructure with our own design and hardware and IP. At the same time, this is not how one can scale very fast. And that's where this announcement from Finance Minister is very, very timely, where a lot of goodness will be coming in the form of policy framework, be it GST reduction or standardization, etc. And we actually welcome all of that. And from complexity perspective, the reason we never touched high-speed vehicle or a large format vehicle because it requires even more complex battery and energy architecture. So from our perspective, we were laser focused on converting the dirty miles, which is coming from gas-powered vehicles, to sustainable miles. Make a business model that works at scale, profitably, not just burning VC money for fun. And we believe that once we have established our energy infrastructure, we have know-how of battery and the EVs in general, adding newer types of EV is not going to be that difficult. So for example, our plan for H2 is also to introduce one mid-speed vehicle, which will be catering to the commercial use case once again, to the likes of Flipkart and Amazon, carrying a much larger payload. The current vehicles are good for lightweight products, good for 4-5 kilometer distance, and we got the very good product market fit. But I think the sky is the limit. But we need to take one step at a time and make sure that whatever we are doing is a success and it's not a half-hearted. And we need to see things in totality, and that's what UDO has done, essentially speaking. Not only the unique vehicle design, but also conviction in swappable battery from day one, where a lot of the industry players in micro-mobility segment were divided whether to use a fixed battery or a swappable battery infrastructure. Now everyone is lining up for that form factor.
Right.
So from our perspective, we keep on electrifying the mobility, keep on replacing the gas-powered miles with electric, and build this ecosystem and open it up at some stage so that larger, more and more people can get benefit out of that. And in this whole vision of 2030 laid by our Prime Minister can be actually a reality of electrifying India's mobility in true sense.
All right, we've run out of time. This has been an interesting discussion, but lots to speak about. And one point which will also be very crucial for India's EV ecosystem is having the right retail financing. Priority sector lending is what the EV sector and also Niti Aayog has recommended the government, recommended the RBI to do. Let's see what happens on that front. Thank you very much, Chetan Maini, Rajiv Singh, Shamsher Dewan, Amit Gupta for joining us. With that, it's a wrap on this special broadcast. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV18.